Uh, I am speaking from the Pacific Northwest, the Cascadia bioregion, in Eugene, Oregon. It's on the wet side or the west side of the Cascades. It's a place where friends and colleagues over the years used to joke, "Tim, you love fire. What are you doing in Eugene? They don't have fires in Eugene or fires on the west side until they do." So the 2020 Labor Day firestorms were a tremendous wake-up call that yes, wildfires did and will happen in where I live. It's, as also you noted, it's the Kalapuya homeland, whom I've learned in my anthropology courses had a pyroculture because fire played such a central role in their culture and economy and sustained their civilization for thousands of years. So it's a place to be here, and I'm just really thrilled by the Lookout series and following that I guess metaphor. I'm going to try to look out over the horizon of our past and future, and try to discuss what you might call a renewed relationship with wildland fire, what that might look like. And my goal is to help maybe overcome some of the fear and despair that people are suffering with these mega fire disasters, and replace that with a sense of humility and hope that, you know, we can relearn how to work safely, how to live sustainably with fire in the land. And that's a very empowering vision. So first I have to confess that I'm a recovering wildland firefighter. I had a work study job in my college back east, maintaining outdoor ice skating rinks, and all I knew was how to screw two ends of a fire hose together. Apparently that's all that was needed for me to be hired by the Forest Service and come out west to fight fires. And I have to confess, I loved fighting fires. I loved the adventure, hiking and camping in wild places, dancing with wildfires. I love the hard physical labor of it, getting sweaty and sooty and not caring. I love the crew camaraderie. I was raised in athletics and team sports, and yeah, you might say firefighting was kind of an extreme sport to me at times. And though it had very low pay, you worked long hours. I was stuck in places with nowhere to spend it. So I was able to pay my way through college with a great life, living in the forest, fighting fires in summers, living in Eugene, learning about fire ecology and fire policy in winters. And a lot of my fire education greatly influenced and inspired, if you will, by the works of Dr. Stephen Pine. I struggle. Do I have any unique thoughts in my head that have not been influenced or inspired by Stephen Pine's work? I'm really thrilled that he's going to be one of the speakers here in a few weeks. But over time, I started developing some cognitive dissonance. The things I was learning about fire ecology, fire policy, fire and culture in schools were contradicted by what I was doing in fire management in summers. And this gap between fire ecology, fire science, and fire management, it continues to grow. I mean, almost heading in opposite directions every year. What we know and what we feel we should do is often the opposite of what we are doing in fire management. And though I renew my red card, I'm certified to go out and fight fires. I do that every year. I choose not to fight fires anymore. Instead, I choose to do things like this, is to do public education and policy advocacy with the organization FUSI, and try to be a voice for those crews who are out still fighting fires. And I am a recovery wildland firefighter. It's not easy. So with the symbol or whatever of my talk on the Greenfire Revolution, to me that's a symbol for this paradigm shift in fire science and management that I'm going to argue we're in the midst of. And it's a revolutionary shift in thinking about wildland fire and humanity's relationship with it, shifting from fire exclusion to something like fire inclusion. This paradigm, this emerging paradigm yet to be named, could it be a paradigm of fire resilience, fire regeneration? We in Fusey are just kind of naming it ecological fire management, and I'll elaborate on whatever we think the boundaries of that are. Now, you wouldn't think that this paradigm shift is happening at all if all you knew about wildfires were what you read or watched in the news media or what you heard from politicians. And it's unfortunate, but often in the midst of lots of wildfire in the landscape, it seems like all we get is a lot of hot air from our politicians, the wrong thing we need, and a lot of hype and hysteria from the news media, the wrong thing we need. The paradigm shift is most evident within the fire science community, and especially in Indigenous communities. But I think it's becoming more evident in the clear, apparent crisis of conventional fire management and many failures of firefighting to protect communities. That's often what necessitates a paradigm shift, is the collapse of the existing dominant one to explain, understand, guide behavior in the face of so many apparent conflicts, contradictions. It does seem clear that our 20th century fire exclusion paradigm is unsuited for our 21st century climate. And so this Lookout series of speakers and artists, I think, is yet another example, evidence of a shifting paradigm, changing how we think and how we relate to wildland fire. So, but like all revolutions, this Greenfire Revolution is not without struggle, and the current dominant fire exclusion paradigm is maintained by systems and structures that are vested stakes in maintaining the status quo. We have government agencies that gain immense power. They can do things on the land unencumbered by environmental laws or regulations or those pesky environmentalists. We have private companies that gain immense profits from engaging in this kind of perpetual annual war on wildfire. And so there's vested political and economic interest in maintaining the existing dominant fire exclusion paradigm. You may call this the fire industrial complex. And then policymakers, opinion makers in government and news media are doing what they can to bolster the dominant paradigm, but it is clear that it is failing to guide us to understand or adapt to our changing reality of mega fires in the era of climate change, or the pyrocene, as Dr. Pine calls it. But I'm just going to argue that the paradigm is shifting. We're in the midst of it. I don't know if it's early, middle, or late stages. The future appears to be something more of an indigenous model of community fire stewardship, replacing this imperial model of state-dominated fire suppression. And so, of course, the future is contingent, and we'll see how it goes. But first, just a short story. How did I come to this paradigm shift? And uh, as a early career Forest Service firefighter, again, I loved fighting fire. One incident I remember, got a smoke report. It's in some very rugged, remote area, the dense forest. I spent a couple hours sniffing it out, you know, and all senses attuned. I was, you know, the hunter gene in me, but I was on a search and destroy mission. And, you know, when I came upon the little lightning fire, it was barely the size of an area rug in someone's living room. I was woefully disappointed. But I dutifully spent hours lining it out, mopping it out, making sure every little smoldering ember put out, saving this one smoldering stump for last. And inside its hollow was this tiny flame, the last flame of that fire area. And, you know, I smothered and I chopped and I put out that flame. But when it was over, I didn't feel like, you know, victory. I vanquished the enemy. I felt a real sadness, a real loss. And it reminded me of that epiphany that Aldo Leopold had when he shot that wolf, thinking he was doing it for the benefit of the ecosystem, the elk herds, and watched as that green fire faded from the wolf's dying eyes. And it just seemed that, you know, in hindsight, that seemed to be what I felt too. A loss, not a gain. And that fire belonged there in a ways that I didn't, at least in what I was doing, didn't belong there. Another way to this this paradigm shift, and the opposite end of my career, when I was a firefighter for the National Park Service, we had a lightning caused fire in a designated wilderness inside the national park. But we were ordered, you had to put it out. We called in 6 hotshot crews, and the park supervisor was terrified. Here come the Marines of Uncle Sam's firefighting force, come to kill the park, to kill fire. So I was tasked with training and supervising them in light hand tactics, is what they were called. Try to minimize the impacts of firefighting, and so, you know, given that opportunity, these crews went to heroic lengths to minimize their impacts. I once saw a sawyer, instead of dropping this giant hollowed snag that was kind of smoldering inside, actually cut a window in the trunk and would take swigs of his water bottle, stick his head in that fuming smokestack of a snag, spit it out to cool down the embers and keep that hollowed habitat snag standing. I mean, there was a hero for habitat. And that too was kind of epiphany. Wow, given the opportunity, change the mission, we could be doing fire management entirely different. And so, truth be told, wildland firefighters don't fear fire, certainly don't hate it. They love fire. They are drawn to charge toward fire, feel best working closest to flame. They have a love of fire, and I think we all do as part of our human nature. And trained as a sociologist, that's a problematic concept. You know, all of our behaviors, a product of our social environments, the social experiences, it's learned behavior. There's nothing instinctual about it. I'm not sure, because I believe we all have some kind of inner innate love and attraction for fire that is part of our species evolution. I call this pyrophilia, love of fire. And I really, again, draw on the works of Stephen Pine, talking about the human fire legacy, our unique human relationship with fire. The only species on Earth with the knowledge and skill and ability to start fires. And the only one crazy enough to try to stop them too. But as a species, we have relatively big brains, small jaws, and hairless limbs because our physiology evolved as tending fire, this unique relationship. We brought fire into our homes. We worked with fire on the land. We developed this innate love and attraction for fire that developed over 1 million years of hominid evolution, multiple millennia of living and working with fire. Now, this innate pyrophilia contrasts with the last 100 years or so of a socially conditioned pyrophobia, this hate and fear of fire that is well, it's mostly for public consumption, the product of propaganda. I would call it pyroganda, that is not shared by wildland firefighters. We do not fear or hate fire. We respect it and largely admire it, and we have a deep love for it. And I think everyone shares it. It's the first thing you want to do after you set up that tent when you go camping, light a campfire and huddle around. And that, you know, our fire was the center of the creation of human communities and cultures and language, maybe even religion, and the tools and technology. Homo sapiens wouldn't be human beings without this vital relationship with fire, a vital reciprocity with fire. And vital, I mean that not just as essential, but life-giving. And it was a reciprocal relationship with fire. We fed and sheltered and nurtured fire. And in turn, fire sheltered and fed and nurtured people. And this is deep rooted. And this is what gives me hope that we can shift our own paradigm and relearn and renew our relationship with wildland fire. And Indigenous peoples never lost that, though they faced a war to extirpate it. But they don't suffer the same cultural amnesia, the same socially conditioned pyrophobia. And so, you know, my hope is that both fusing what we're discovering and learning in fire ecology science with the cultural burning practices and traditions and ancient wisdom of Indigenous communities, that shows us the path forward, looking out over the horizon into the future, drawing from the past, how we might be able to work and live with fire in the land. And so that's really offers my hope for humanity. And, you know, it's not a radical notion, people love fire. It's been largely removed from our urban industrial existence. It's ever present but invisible. But here's where we draw on the humanities to reveal what's kind of hidden in plain sight. Look how fire is represented in music and poetry and art. It's, you know, fire is the language of love or language of lust. It's in religion. I did a study on fire and religion, absolutely ubiquitous. Every religion, ancient, contemporary, great, small, there was a literal or symbolic role of fire. And you go, I dare say there's probably not a single church or synagogue or mosque or temple that doesn't have fire somewhere in it. And it, again, it's a remnant, living legacy of what was once a dominant belief of our loving relationship and vital reciprocity with fire. So here we are now, in the era of megafires and the age of the pyrocene, if you will. And we have this, I would say, a false impression of this overabundance of fire on the land. And it's because, this is all we're fed by the news media. And, there might be these gigafires covering 1 million acres. And all we see on the TV screen are the raging crown fires or the charred remains of a forest, or more likely the incinerated ruins of someone's home, someone's neighborhood. I mean, the dominant specter of climate change in the Western US is wildfire. The dominant image of wildfire is a burnt home. And there's yet another kind of gap in what we're talking about. And the problem, I think, is following World War II. On up through the 1940s, tens of millions of acres burned in the US annually on average. It wasn't a national crisis, it was a government state of emergency. Places like the Southeast have always been burning. But following World War II, there was a kind of prolonged cool, moist period, part of natural climate variability. But it was also coupled when we really started ramping up commercial logging in national forests and mechanized firefighting. And there's many people kind of associate the two. There's a classic case of correlation does not mean causation. All that logging and firefighting wasn't responsible for the crash in the number of acres burned annually. A lot of it was a part of the weather. And so that lasted from the 1950s to the 1980s, and an historic fire deficit occurred over that time period that accumulated year after year over those decades. So places that would have, could have, should have burned had we not, aggressively put them out, and had we not prevented indigenous peoples from putting them in, that has accumulated. So now that cool, moist period ended in the 1980s, we entered a warmer, drier period, amplified by climate change, which is now kind of magnifying people's socially conditioned pyrophobia. We've been kind of raised to fear wildfire, forest fires. Now it's coupled with legitimate fears of climate change, and it's terrifying. And the news is awash in, it seems, endless stories of tragedy and disaster and catastrophe, mostly centered on burned homes, incinerated communities. But that post-war period where we were successful in dramatically reducing the amount of fire on the ground, it led to a false sense of mastery. We can control fire. It led to a false sense of security. We can live in formerly fire-prone areas and not worry about it. And so now we are, as a society, just woefully unprepared for our new reality of the pyrocene and all the conditions of climate and weather and fuels and people and property placed in risk. So where do we go forward? Because basically the fire exclusion paradigm sets us at an endless and escalating and essentially unwinnable war against wildfire, one of the most powerful and vital forces of nature. And if you are dedicated to a forever war against fire, which has existed on Earth over 400 million years, it's essentially a war on nature. And, in making war on nature, of course, we're damned if we lose, and we are losing. And we are getting wildfire activity that is overwhelming the ability of flesh and blood bodies, young firefighters, to stop them from spreading and put them out. We are losing this war on wildfire, but we're equally damned if we were to win this war, because we would be inhabiting a very different planet. Ecosystems that co-evolved with fire, essential to regenerate certain plant species, to rejuvenate wildlife habitats. It would be a very, very different planet we'd be living on. And I'm just going to argue, and I think there's plenty of evidence, it is socially, economically, ecologically unsustainable to continue forever this war on wildfire. So what's the way forward? How can we live with large fires? Before Western colonization of California, on average, 4 million acres burned in that area every year. 400 million acres burned last year, and it was a crisis. It was a catastrophe. It was like dramatic. Well, how long can we go on in that kind of crisis management mode? So I think the way forward is first, let's separate the two fires. And I can't wait to hear Steve Pines talk on the three fires. But the two fires is, I think we've wrongly conflated wildfires that burn in wild lands with urban fires that may have been ignited from a spreading wildfire, but once a wildfire enters an urban, suburban area, it's an urban fire. It's entered the wildland urban interface. The acronym is WUI, pronounced WUI. Once a wildfire enters an urban fire, it becomes a WUI fire, and it's a very different animal. And so it's clear we cannot prevent or put out all wildfires in wildlands, nor should we even attempt it. We cannot fireproof forests, but we figured out some time ago that we can prevent urban conflagrations. We can put out house fires. We can even fireproof communities, and we've largely done this in the big cities back east. So somehow we need to translate or transfer those lessons to the West. And in FUSI, we believe, the sooner we prepare communities for fire, the sooner we can restore ecosystems with fire and restore those fire-adapted cultures that co-evolve with fire. So let's separate the two kinds of fires. They're two different fire problems, or I'd say fire challenges. Wildfires burn in wildlands, and that demands a whole different set of strategy and tactics and managing those. And WUI fires burn in communities. So what do we do and the focus of FUSI is what do we do in wildland fire management? And our mission as an organization, we promote safe, ethical, ecological fire management. So, safety is number one. Safety of firefighters, safety of the public, number one priority, every fire incident, every fire management action. That's policy. But that's philosophy as well. Safety is number one. Ethics is at the heart of our mission. And we mean that in the sense of in environmental ethics, a different way of relating, not just with fire, but fire adapted ecosystems, fire dependent species, a different environmental ethics. It also means a kind of professional public service ethics as well for fire management. And then ultimately, ecology is the bottom line. If it's not sustainable, ecologically speaking, it's not going to be sustainable in any other aspect as well. So we've kind of paraphrased Aldo Leopold's land ethic to come up with a what we call a fire ethic, to kind of guide us in how do we respond to fire in the land, or how do we respond? And I'll just read it here. A thing is right when it contributes to the safety of firefighters and the public, ethical use of public resources, environmental protection of fire-affected landscapes, and ecological restoration of fire-dependent ecosystems. It is wrong when it tends otherwise. And Aldo Leopold's land ethic, very broad, subject to multiple interpretations, multiple forms of practice, similar with ecological fire management. Ultimately, it's going to have to be a kind of a place-based practice. And again, kind of fusing modern fire ecology science and all the discoveries we're making and knowledge we're accumulating in that field with indigenous ecological knowledge and the cultural burning practices guided by this triad of safety, ethics, and ecology. I think offers us a kind of vague vision forward. And so we have a kind of a provocative slogan: we should not fight another wildfire. We should manage every wildfire. And that, fundamentally, the Greenfire Revolution is a cultural revolution. And it begins with, changing our language, changing our symbols in fire management. And current fire management is just pervasive with militaristic discourse. The news media leads with a war metaphor. And I mean, it begins with the central concept of firefighting, and all the terms of initial attack, extended attack, hell attack, attack. The very words we use kind of frames a mindset that sets up already a combative relationship with wildland fire. And from this mindset, it guides our behavior. So I think we just have to jettison all that militaristic discourse. It's baggage. It never was true to begin with. Firefighters don't fight flames, mano a mano. You'll get your hands burned. We typically fight forests. We beat up on the soils, the vegetation. It's firefighting is a misnomer at best, and we need to just jettison that militarist discourse. You detect a wildfire. The first thing is not initial attack; it's initial action, and there's a whole range of actions you might take depending on the circumstances. Much more open stance. And I've had several friends kind of, tist him. You're so critical of aggressive militaristic firefighting, yet your name says Firefighters United for Safety, Ethics, Ecology. Well, it's true. This is where we're at. We are trying to appeal to the fire management community, of which a majority of people in the community start out as firefighters or are firefighters, and myself included. But we're working for that day sometime in the future where perhaps the name firefighter and its identity and its mission may be as obsolete as the term used to be called smoke chaser. And you hardly ever hear that. Most people would prefer to run away from smoke, not run toward it. But so let's change the name of this occupation. Change the identity of the people doing fire management to something that is more evocative of ecological fire management. And we've proposed a couple of things. Instead of firefighters, call them firelighters, because that's really what needs to be done. A lot more fire lighting, starting prescribed fires, starting cultural burns. We have this historic fire deficit that only fire can compensate. And so turn firefighters into firelighters. But we'll never get to where we need to be with prescribed burning alone. And what's showing us the way is wildfire. The unplanned ignitions come from lightning or other sources. And why are we putting those out when they may be burning in places or conditions that are just ideal for accomplishing the goals of a prescribed burn, only it's an ignition from a natural source. Instead of stopping those fires, we should be steering them away from the places that can't burn, that are destroyed by fire, homes, communities. Steering them into places where we've done our research and done our planning and know should burn, would benefit from burning. Steer those flames. Don't stop them. Don't put them out. So maybe we should change firefighters into fire guiders, using the human hands to help kind of lovingly guide the fire into the places we want to burn and away from those places we don't want to burn. But that's, it's something, maybe something a little bit more broader, more visionary, more publicly appealing. Firelighters, fire guiders. I'm not sure that will resonate. So how's this? Fire rangers. And maybe it's the old parky in me that I love being a park ranger. And I love being a firefighter. How I put the two together, doing more good fire stuff. Call them fire rangers. And their mission is to start fires, steer fires, steward the land with fire, keep communities safe, because it's not going to end suppression. It's just going to force us to be more selective and strategic. Where do we put young bodies in harm's way? Protecting homes and communities where they're both more needed and most effective. Where do we not need them? We do not need to put a young body to try to stop a lightning fire from burning the top of a mountain in a wilderness area. That's just a pure waste and unnecessary risk. But fire rangers will be actively managing wildland fires in wildland places. And so our notion of ecological fire management is not let it all burn, because that's a scary thing to most people. The specter of unfettered wildfire burning, unchecked. And no, it's using our best science and the best of our native legacy and lessons that they are offering to share to actively manage wildland fires with ecological goals and objectives in mind. And so the goal would be to manage wildland fires in ways that maximize their social and ecological benefits, but minimize the damage and costs that come from fire management actions, mitigate the risks and hazards to people and property. And it's a very holistic approach to actively managing wildland fires. Ecological fire management includes human communities in our notion of ecosystems, where people are really genuinely a part of nature and not assuming to stand apart from nature. And so we should not fight another wildfire. We should manage every wildfire, even if it means monitoring them. They're doing good. They're doing excellent work. Why put people at risk? Why incur taxpayer costs? Why cause unnecessary impacts to the environment from aggressively trying to manage it? So our vision of ecological fire management is a way we can kind of separate wildfires from WUI fires. And there's nothing like fire that influence wildfire. In fact, during the peak periods of high intensity wildfires in California, you know, the August complex, the gigafire, government threw everything at that. Thousands of crews and heavy metal in the sky, air taker, dozers, engines. Nothing influenced fire behavior or fire spread as encountered in a recent burned area. Fire has the most influence on fire, particularly the fuels that really propel fire spread, which are those small diameter deadened down needles and limbs and saplings and shrubs, the things that have no commercial value. Even if they were to have commercial value, much of the West is too rugged and rocky and remote to extract that as a profit. The impacts of machines would be devastating. The fossil fuels we would burn, nothing like fire influences fire. And there's another story. Right now, wildfire is a specter of climate change. It's the global warming. Wildfires are a scary thing to people. Well, ecological fire management has a role as a climate solution, because burning that small diameter surface fuel, it recycles those short-term stores of carbon into soil nutrients, reduces the fuel that poses a risk of fire to the big trees and the deep organic soils. Those are where the majority of carbon in forest stored over the long term. And charcoal itself are like little ingots of black gold. They lock in and store carbon a long, long time, on the scale of centuries. And so there's a role of fire in helping store and sequester carbon in forest ecosystems that only work, of course, if we don't log the big trees and don't light high intensity backfires under the worst of conditions. Often a desperate act, the only thing that may have some impact on these fires burning in extreme conditions. So there is a role of fire as a climate solution, and that too gives me some hope. And so last, our symbol as an organization, our motto, if you will, is we're torchbearers for a new fire management paradigm. And symbolically, a torchbearer is a trailblazer. It sheds light and shows the path ahead. Lady Liberty is a torchbearer, you know, a beacon for people seeking freedom and democracy and a new life. And so we mean that symbolically, of course. We're torchbearers for a new paradigm, but we mean it literally too, is that we need to be picking up more torches and applying them, not as an act of war, but as a labor of love, you know, guided by this Leopoldian fire ethic and the best of fire ecology science, and perhaps even led by indigenous communities and cultural burning practitioners, who can show us that prescribed burning is much more than reducing hazardous fuels. It's about stewarding the land. And so we're torchbearers for a new fire paradigm. And this image of green fire, which some, I think, indigenous people call good fire, but the greening of fire management, where we can recall ancient, you know, wisdom and association of fire with life, one of the foundational elements of life. I think that gives us both a sense of humility, because we're not masters of flame on the earth, but we bear perhaps a responsibility, maybe an ecological duty. Maybe it's our species' ecological role. We're not just a parasite or a plague on the planet. With our use of fire, you know, to steward the land and enhance biological productivity and diversity, you know, we can tend life and biological communities with fire and end this war on wildfire, and you know, be the bearers of the green fire. So that's my hope, and that's my firm belief. We're in the midst of a paradigm shift. It's a cultural, you know, cognitive revolution. I'm just symbolizing it as the Greenfire Revolution. It's really an ancient and future paradigm simultaneously, and that's what I've dedicated my life, what our organization dedicates itself, promoting safe, ethical, ecological fire management to keep the green fire burning. So thank you for all you attentiveness listening. Carly, let me turn it over to you for, you know, question and answers.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tim. And we put the link to Fuse in the chat for folks who want to check it out more. I invite everybody who's out there to pose questions in chat if you have any, and I'll try to get to those. Tim, your story about this moment of, as you talked about, this cognitive dissonance moment where, you know, you're likening yourself to Leopold seeing that green fire go out in the wolf's eye, and you seeing that same thing happen in this, you know, like bowl that you had put out. That's a really powerful story, and it really captures that feeling of dissonance. And I know for me, and I think for other folks out there, we are in that moment where we've been brought up fearing fire and thinking that it's the, you know, the thing that we need to put out, and also loving it, and now trying to manage both of those things on this very large scale. So what guidance do you have for us as we are holding both of those things individually and also culturally? How do we navigate?
Well, first of all, is, I guess, an article of faith, but I have to believe that 1,000,000 years of our species' evolution and relationship with fire that's developed an innate love of fire is going to overcome barely 100 years of this socially conditioned, fear and hatred of fire. All fires must be feared and fought. I just got to believe that our inner nature is going to burst forth, but and it's going to have to be part of a wider kind of cultural revolution in our relationship with Earth and all the other species and systems of life. So, but where faith comes is the joy that people feel when they get close to fire, or when they get to carry fire, tend fire. Mm-hmm. It's real, it's natural. It dispels a lot of fear. So we're not going to get past it by just sitting and waiting in our homes, hoping that firefighters will save us or that fires will never happen. It's you got to shift from this reactive fighting against fire to proactive working with fire. And that means bringing it right to our doorsteps, ending this mystique of fire and wildlands. This comes from a kind of monopolization of fire management in government hands. Whole communities coming out. And as a kid growing up back east, it was the greatest joy raking up the leaves and burning them too. And the whole neighborhood would smell. It's the smell of autumn to me, burning leaves. That needs to happen too. And I believe once people are provided the opportunity, much as those firefighters, those hotshots had that opportunity to change their mission, amazing things will happen.
Thank you. There are a couple people who have asked what the difference is between cultural fire and prescribed burning. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, yeah. First of all, I got to be a little humble. I will not have the fullest, deepest understanding of the vast dimensions, multiple dimensions, the spiritual dimension of cultural burning, because that's an element too. I mean, to me, fire is not simply a management tool. It's a force of nature, and it's a force of our nature. And Indigenous cultural burning, they apply fire to the ground, not just again to prevent wildfires, reduce hazardous fuels, to tend life and all the plants that depend on fire, to provide, that are enhanced by fire, provide food and fiber and medicine to native peoples and to other non-human animals. So that's the difference between prescribed burning as we're currently practicing it, very narrow. It's about fuels, versus cultural burning. It's about life and its fullest sense of the community. So that's my Western and
well, thank you. Yeah, thanks so much. And for those of you, more interested in that, Margot Robbins was one of our speakers earlier in the series, and she, of course, talked about that in detail with through her organization, Cultural Fire, and we'll put a link to that in chat to that lecture so you can learn more from and with her. She also talked a lot about the importance of however you're putting fire back in the landscape, with if you call it cultural burning or prescribed fire. That's what we need, is fire back in the landscape. I'm just looking at our time here to see if we have a time for another question. So what can people do, to scale this up, to scale up the paradigm shift, the move toward increased cultural or prescribed fires, to support FUSE and the work that you're doing? How can everyday folks be involved in this?
great question. That's the other parts of the Greenfire Revolution that is a whole other discussion. But first of all, you know, it, it, wildland firefighters, they need care. I mean, we elevate them as heroes in combat. But, you know, if this pandemic has hopefully taught us anything, is that healers can be heroes too. And they need our support, you know, as essential workers. They're essential, but not expendable. And I fear that that's kind of where we're headed. Yeah, it's a war. War is hell, and soldiers die. And it's a moral cause. And it's just, no. Wildland firefighters need care. And I mean, every firefighter is someone's son or daughter. Parents should be looking out, and they should be on our policymakers. You know, we just passed this infrastructure law, billions of dollars to the Forest Service. And as far as I can see, they're just going to throw more blood and treasure up for the old paradigm. Yeah, with even more fuels reduction across the landscape, we can prevent mega fires. Well, that money probably should start being invested in homes and communities, because we can fireproof homes. We can't fireproof forests. And that's where it's needed and probably most wanted. So taxpayers ought to be in on this. How are their tax dollars being spent? And these, you know, these siege-like suppression spectacles with Air Force attacks and dozers and engines. Basically, we need to invest in communities and in people, because ecological farm management is largely a labor-intensive, not a capital-intensive thing. You buy an air tanker and it has one mission, one function, and it's not necessarily effective or desired. You invest in a person, and it's a full spectrum value. They can put fires out, they can put them in, they can light them and guide them and all that stuff. So I see a tremendous opportunity for young people. I mean, it's fundamentally a hard job made for young bodies, strong knees. You know, making a living, not a killing, but making a living, stewarding the land with fire. What a great mission. You know, and so that's a couple ideas. Yeah. What parents, taxpayers, and communities can do.
Well, thank you so much. And I'll encourage everyone to check out FUSE's website for more and really a wealth of information about the idea of shifting language as we shift the paradigm and how important that is. We are grateful for you for being here, for the work that you're doing, for managing this online presenting world with us. We're really grateful. And for all of you who are out there this evening, I invite you to join us next week, where we'll be joined by Stuart Pauly and really get to see a lot of what you're talking about, Tim, you know, with this intensive photographic work that he's been doing now for many years. So thank you. Thanks to all of you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
All right.
Good night.
Appreciate it. Take care.
You too.